Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Now let's go to Europe because this all comes as an AI summit is being held in Paris. French President Macron just spoke there. For more on all of this, we turn to Bloomberg's Tom Mackenzie at that summit and with the new French Finance Minister, Lombard.
Yes, absolutely. The Minister of Finance, Monsieur le Ministre, Lombard, standing by for this conversation, guys. And we're going to start, Monsieur le Ministre, with that announcement from the French President Macron just a few minutes ago, around 109 billion euros, about 113 billion US dollars, of additional investment in France to build out AI data centers and infrastructure to better position France. Is this the French response to Stargate in the US?
Well, it is not exactly the response to Starlink because we had started that long time ago. All our power policy to build nuclear power plants, to have green energy and independent energy in France, stable and cheap, will allow us to have data centers. And this plan is to finance for more than 100 billion euro data centers and all that goes around that with research teams, with developers, with scientists. And we are already present on that world of AI, but we will increase our investment rhythm in order to cope with the competition. And with 100 billion euro, if you do the proportion with the French population, it's in line with the 500 billion of the United States.
So you're confident that this amount will be enough and that this amount of funding will be delivered?
Well, that is the amount for the day. So obviously the story doesn't stop here. We have to implement those investments. The biggest one is from UAE, United Arab Emirates, from MGX, investing 50 million euros, but many other investors are there, and that will launch an initiative in France and in other European countries.
Is this a France, is this a Europe that is playing catch-up with the US, playing catch-up with China?
Yes, Europe has always been at the level of the competition in all fields, in automotive, in airline. The airline industry is booming in France, and we want in AI, in the digital world, to be at the level, and that's for France and for the rest of Europe.
We've had new threats today from President Trump on tariffs, steel and aluminium. Europe produces both. What should the European response be to these tariff threats?
Well, President Trump is a deal maker, so Europe will answer as strongly as the position of the United States, and either we'll have our own tariffs or we negotiate. We'll see according to the reaction of the United States to the answer we are preparing.
Europe already has reciprocal tariffs in place on US steel from the previous trade conflict. They are now frozen. They could be unfrozen in March. Is that an easy response for Europe to go to? You unfreeze those reciprocal tariffs and let them snap back in?
I will not give the answer before we have the official answer from Europe.
How much pain is Europe prepared to inflict on the US?
We are prepared to do whatever is necessary in order to be balanced. We have the same tools, we have the same weapons if need be, and we will use them very calmly.
And we can assume that the European Commission has a list of targets that they would enact tariffs on.
We are ready because we knew that was coming, so we are ready.
Okay. President Trump has asked for a probe into taxes globally. And one thinks that the digital taxes that France has that overwhelmingly impact US tech companies and bring in, 500 to 700 million euros a year. Would you and France consider dropping that digital tax in order to avoid a trade war?
I'm not sure that the tax issue is related to the trade war, but we have put together a tax actually on the digital companies that we are maintaining because that is the law of France, and we'll see whether that comes into another type of conflict with the United States. I hope it will not, because tax is a question of sovereignty, and every country has its own tax system. We have our own, and we will stick to that.
But would you consider putting the digital tax on the table as a negotiating chip?
It is not a negotiating tool. We have it already in place.
So it's not, the digital tax is not changing?
No, it's not changing.
There was some debate last year that you might raise it from 3% to 5%. Do you put that debate on hold? Do you keep it at 3%?
We will have the negotiation and the discussion with the US administration.
Okay. Investors are looking at France around questions of political stability. Monsieur Bayrou, the Prime Minister, has pushed through his budget. How convinced can investors be, how certain can they be of political stability towards the end of this year, or is another snap election the most obvious outcome?
We have a budget that has been passed, and we are working on the next year's budget, and our goal with the Prime Minister is to work until the presidential election that will take place in 2027. Obviously, it's a parliamentary system, but I'm convinced that with the policy we are putting in place, we have stability in the medium term.
We have stability in the medium term. We cannot rule out those snap elections later this year in France.
We can never rule out that the Parliament makes another decision, but at this stage the Parliament is supporting our policy, and I'm confident that will last.
And when you speak to business executives globally who are looking potentially to invest or potentially to pause their investments in France, do you get a sense that the French brand, France Inc., has been damaged as a result of political uncertainty?
I don't believe that, for two reasons. Today we had more than 100 billion of commitment to invest in France, and also if you look at the price of the French 10-year debt, which was higher than the Greek one a few weeks ago, is now below. And hopefully the policy, because we have a policy of reducing the budget deficit,
5.4%. 5.4% is the target.
And we will stick to that, and we will target 3% in 2029.
Is that realistic, 3%?
It's a commitment I've taken in France of my European colleagues, and yes, we will stick to that.
I want to loop back to EU AI regulation now. That is being implemented in Europe this year at a time when President Trump is slashing AI regulations in the US. To what extent does that handicap Europe?
Well, you are right. This Europe regulation is too tight and too cumbersome. And on the top of the agenda, we have an agenda of simplification of the European regulation. And the summits in Europe are really geared toward that goal, and we are working on it. IA regulation is not the biggest problem for the investors. We have other type of regulations that we will slash or simplify in order to be more business friendly going forward.
So that should be the focus, not on adapting the EU AI Act. I mean, should the EU AI Act be adapted, be rethought in light of the changes around regulation in the US?
What the professional, we had a roundtable at the Élysée Palace today, what they tell me, it is a way of IA Act is implemented, which may be a problem in certain countries, not the IA Act itself. So we will adapt in order to cope with the demand of the business.
On the investment front, I've been speaking to executives here throughout the day, and one CEO of an AI company said to me, funding infrastructure in Europe is the wrong solution. We want to be in funding value creation. Is there a risk that the funding around data centers and chips ends up being misplaced?
You have to do both. Today there is a plan for the infrastructure, but yesterday Mistral IA, the French IA company, opened its new tool, Le Chat, and that is a large success.
Yeah.
So I'm quite confident that we will have both at the same time.
Does France have the fiscal room, does Europe have the fiscal room to spend on both the infrastructure and the value creation?
It's not fiscal. The investment is coming from private investors.
Okay.
So we don't need tax support for that.
Talk to us about your projections for growth for France. What are the productivity gains that could come from AI? What are you projecting in terms of the potential upside on productivity gains?
I'm sure you have read the Draghi report. We have to increase the productivity gain in France. We are too limited all across Europe. And that goes through investing and training, and we'll do both.
Okay, Monsieur le Ministre, merci. Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Eric Lombard, the Finance Minister of France, on that AI investments and the response to those threatened Trump tariffs.